I'm Jeff Woodward, and this is ReSkilled. Remington Nelson is an entrepreneurial spirit who has tried on a couple of different careers before settling into the tech world as a full-stack developer. She's currently a lead DevOps at 2swater.com, and her first foray into the tech industry was via a technical bootcamp on the West Coast. Welcome, Remy.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
You've done a few different things and done some reskilling, and we're going to talk a little bit about both your good and your bad experiences and your formal and your informal experiences with that, because you've kind of done it all.
It's a good industry for curious people.
I bet, actually, yeah. So tell me what a lead DevOps does for those who don't know.
We're focused a lot on what we call the back end of computer systems, the part that the user will hopefully never see. That's my job. All the parts that keep things online, keep them reliable, let people update smoothly in ways that don't take everything down. And in my current role, we're really early in the process. So I also get to do a lot of the decisions around what we use to build our systems out of, which is really exciting. I absolutely love that aspect of it.
That's probably a really interesting process. I'm going to focus a little bit on the bootcamp program. We're not going to name the program, and people will understand why when we're talking about it. But what was your goal upon entering the bootcamp? How long was the program?
It was just over 2 months, like 2 months plus a week. And I just really needed that motivational push. And I would say the bootcamp, that is where it was successful. Like, I sat down and I programmed for like 12 hours a day for 2 months. And that did happen.
What was the sort of promise of the bootcamp? What made you sign up?
They had posted on their website something like 95% employment rate within 3 months of completion, and a bunch of these job opportunity supports. And I knew I could teach myself the programming. I'd already been on Codecademy before this. I knew the resources that were out there. I have a lot of people in my life very willing to help me learn to program. That's kind of the thing about programming. As soon as you put it out into the world that you'd like to learn, like 5 computer touchers show up to tell you what's what.
Computer touchers? I've never heard that before. That's fantastic.
I always like it because it sounds slightly scandalous. So I was really in there for the job hookups, like 100%. And I found out, like, literally the week I was finishing the program, they'd made all those numbers up. Because my cohort was the very first one they surveyed, and they made a big deal about it.
Oh my goodness.
And the numbers were much worse than the ones they'd told me going in.
So all did not go as you expected it would go. So tell me a little bit about sort of the day-to-day experience of the bootcamp, and maybe when you felt like it started going sideways on you.
My first warning happened pretty early. Week 1 finished, and they started talking about the exam happening in week 2. And I went, wait a minute, isn't this a self-directed program? I didn't know there was any exams. And they went, oh yes, there's 3 exams. And if you don't pass 2 of the 3, you fail the program.
Wow. But
my first alarm bell was when I realized that almost all of the staff there were like just unhappy to be there. Like, they just don't care. They're not there to give their best. Every member of staff that wasn't an instructor had that vibe. And I did a little sniffing, and almost all of them were previous students of the boot camp. And I was like, okay, so all your infrastructure is apparently built by these students that you trained in 2 months. So that's probably not great, because programmers with 2 months of training are not great. And also, like, there's eating your own dog food, and then there's generating your own cheap labor. And it felt a lot more like generating their own cheap labor and potentially boosting their employment numbers.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it seemed like the actual bootcamp process was a lot more about getting people into that startup burn culture, if that makes sense to you. Like, that it's always crunch time, and you're always going hard, and you're never asking about the reward kind of culture.
Right at the beginning, you said that you coded for 12 hours a day. That seems like
a
lot for school.
And that is actually why I call myself self-taught, because I came out of that and realized I remembered nothing. Like, I'd written tests on it. I had programs I could run on my computer that I had written. I had the evidence that I knew this stuff, but none of it was left in my head at the end.
So not a lot of pedagogical methodology involved.
No, they made a big deal before I signed up about how this was a tested and true syllabus. They'd gone through this coursework, they'd really nailed it down, and they completely overhauled it after our cohort. And I made friends with people in the cohort before mine as well. And it had completely changed from their cohorts. This was not finalized curriculum at all. So we started with Ruby and we learned sort of your basic command line kind of programming.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did a little bit of focus on databases. And then we went into JavaScript at the end. So we get to this third test. And at this point, people who failed the database test and the Ruby test, they've already been either kicked out of the program or knocked back to the next cohort, which was kind of the thing. Like you could always choose, instead of losing your money, to just start over with the next group of people.
Okay.
So there's people already that have been knocked back and told that they're going to take an extra month or two to finish this program at this point. So we hit this JavaScript test and the entire cohort fails. Like everybody fails. And they just decided it didn't count. And I'm like, that's not a lot of confidence in your curriculum right there.
That's a pretty big red flag.
At that point, we were like a week from done. I just so distinctly remember all of the people that we had started this program with who had been like knocked into the previous cohort. And they were just like, what? It doesn't even count. I could have just finished. What are we doing this for? Does none of it matter?
That's wild. How many people were in your cohort?
I think there was 34.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's big.
It was, yeah, especially since they sort of overlapped cohorts. So it would be 2 months, but a month in, they would start the next one. So that you were actually sharing this very small room with like 60 people. And then when they started their online, they actually streamed the lectures into rooms they had rented around the country. So the lecturer was trying to respond to online questions while trying to also talk to 60 people, while trying not to disturb, half of them if they were working on something instead of listening to the lecture. It was just a bit of a mess.
That's wild. So you finished the boot camp, and what happened then? Did you find a job? Did you decide you needed to retrain yourself? Where did you go?
I ended up just kind of floating around for a bit. And I had, before that, done a really brief stint as HR at a tech company. So I actually had really good connections and thought I would have no issues getting into the field at all. It was fairly early in the bootcamp game, but bootcamps had already gotten a little bit of a sour reputation. It was a bit of an awkward place to try to come in. And it didn't end up working out great. And people were just not prepared for it at all. I picked up a few small contracts. I've always been pretty entrepreneurial. So I was kind of sweeping up a couple contracts to keep things going. And there was some turnover where their head of career services, she was now in charge of like Canada-wide for this boot camp. And then when they decided they were doing a local group and contacted me, I agreed to work for them, figuring, hey, let's get some of my money back. And it was one of the worst employers I've ever had. Like I said, when I came out, I felt like I knew nothing at all. So here I am trying to like mentor people with no industry experience. And they'd entirely changed the curriculum. I just didn't feel like I could help people at all, other than with like high level concepts that I could have discussed before I did the program.
Yeah.
And it was just so banana pants. The first contract they sent me had a section where they tried to lay claim to anything I wrote or would write in the future. And I wrote them back being like, I'm not doing a lot of contracts right now, but I'm not going to sign off like my client's work to you guys for the sake of a few hours here and there.
That's wild.
Every time they sent me back a contract that would do less of an IP grab, it would also come back with like less pay listed, less guaranteed hours, all that stuff. In the end, they never actually even gave me like the most reduced version of the hours that they had promised.
Wow.
They just did not even attempt to hold to like their contract at all.
So it sounds to me a little bit like they modeled all the worst aspects of the tech industry.
Oh, definitely.
In terms of IP grabs, crunch time all the time.
Yeah. It was this great crash course in what to avoid. And I paid a lot of money for that.
Well, they say life lessons are some of the most expensive ones. So
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for my own experience, I found I had better like luck in the job market when I removed it from my resume and told people I was self-taught.
interesting. What was your first real quote unquote job in the tech industry, and after that, and how did that compare to what your expectations were at that point?
I did end up working with a fairly small shop. They were a 4-person team. They're very loosely sort of affiliated, all remote. A lot of government contracts really kind of keeping them afloat, that kind of a shop. Your mediocre, crappy software shop that tends to pick up people when they don't have a lot of experience. It was an interesting experience in itself. The industry is definitely something you need to keep on your toes with.
Yeah, it sounds like it can be a little exploitative.
Yes, yes, it can. So yeah, that one also didn't last super long. Just in general, yeah, it wasn't the greatest fit, and I would say a lot of that has to do around with communication issues, which is always going to be probably your biggest hurdle in the industry in general. Like tech is just people tend to get into it because they don't want to communicate and they don't want to deal with other people. The entire industry is collaboration and communication and getting ideas across clearly with no room for ambiguity because, anytime there's ambiguity, money just keeps falling into the hole until it plugs it up.
Awesome. So now the $64,000 question, Remy, is with the benefit of hindsight and sort of where you are now. You found some success in the industry. You're doing cool work. Would you do it again? Were there lessons in there that were worthwhile?
I honestly think, like, even given my history, like, I know I can tackle complex subjects on my own. I know I can demonstrate that knowledge after. I don't know that I would have taken the time out to actually sit down and just force myself to think with computing because it's such a mentally taxing industry. I always have to balance my computing with doing something that's mindless and kind of physical because you go through those phases where you're thinking. That's just really hard to sit down and do if you don't have someone making you do it. And so I'd say if someone came to a boot camp and that's what they were looking for out of it, just someone to make them sit down and do it, they're probably going to be happy with their outcomes.
Fantastic. I want to thank you very much for joining us on ReSkilled. It was a real pleasure talking with you.
It was good to meet you too.
ReSkilled is brought to you by Onlia, an e-learning production company located on Treaty 6 land in Amasquatchie, Waskayakan, also known as Edmonton, Canada. This episode was produced by Beau Desonier, William Fritzberg, Mel Giel, Adriana Lopez Ferrero, and me, Jeff Woodward.
Onlia.